Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to WyzGyz Entertainment. This is your host, Wyman. This is, I guess, an out of the theater review of Michael. Just got around to watching it finally. I was itching to catch a movie. Hadn't been to the theater in a long time, and I still enjoyed the movie going. Hold on, movie going experience. So, um, big Michael Jackson fan. I did enjoy it. It was pretty cool and all. It's basically a biopic, just like if you saw the Queen one with Freddie Mercury. That was a really good movie too. This one was good. I don't know if I'd quite say it's as good as the Queen one because there was just so much to the Queen one, and it seemed like they covered so much material. But as soon as the movie started, I was already, basically mouthing the lyrics to the songs that were coming up. Uh, it's one of those where there might be very minor spoilers, but it's like, let me see something actually. Um, bu- 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 okay, so I guess supposedly two of the platforms are live, or two of the platforms have people on it. Excuse me. So, as with all my movie nuggets, there's definitely going to be spoilers here and there. This maybe not so much because so many people are fans of Michael and know so much about him and his history. It starts with, it's one of those movies where it starts with him in a recent concert, which was I think it was after the Thriller album. Oh, but excuse me, it was starts there. Then it takes you back to early childhood. And man, Joe Jackson, all the actors did a great job as far as I'm concerned. Um, some may be wondering, the brothers are represented in the movie. Joe Jackson and his mother. I forget her first name, but they're representative. They're represented in the movie, and also Latoya Jackson. Per some stories I've read, Latoya and I think Paris Jackson opted not to be involved whatsoever. They were against the release of this movie for some reason or another. And in any case, the acting was well done. Jafar Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew, did an excellent job portraying his uncle. Um, Very good job. Yeah, so early childhood and Joe's kind of maybe verbal or emotional abuse towards his kids. I'm kind of mixed. On one hand, I think he pushed all the kids too far, especially the boys, into, he kind of had to do whatever it takes to become successful so they could leave Gary, Indiana, where they started. Um, and I think they said that Joe Jackson was a steel mill worker and he didn't want the same to be the future of his children. So, on one hand, he pushed them all to one particular goal of his. And I don't know if he went to the music industry because he saw early promise of them all being musically talented or what. It's not really clear. It just has that as a focus, them being a band, five brothers singing and performing. Uh, It was pretty cool. You had a lot of the songs you will immediately recognize. There were one or two songs that I didn't quite remember hearing. I think one or two during the movie, and then one during the closing credits. Um, I in his early, he always had his father looming over him, and despite those days being the era where it was common for parents to take a belt or a switch to their kid if they misbehaved. This didn't feel like he had, that Joe Jackson didn't have that kind of justification to do it towards his kids. That his kids, he kept pushing and pushing and pushing to perform constantly to improve their performance to as close as perfection as they could find. But at the same time, I mean, on one hand, I think his for the belt option for anyone who disagreed or misbehaved, was a little on the extreme side. But I think at the same time, the fact that he had them practice and practice and practice um, during all hours of the night, it probably gave them some structure. Gave some, but as is one of the complaints about Michael, he didn't have much of a childhood. He didn't have time to really get to know and play with the local kids or any kids growing up because he was immediately thrown into performing with his brothers at small venues. I think some of them were bars. They did county fairs and festivals as they were looking for performer, gigs. And Joe Jackson was definitely a driving force, and he pushed the family to you know go to all the perform at all these venues, and that's how a lot of performers make it until they're quote unquote discovered. Um, they didn't mention anything about Diana Ross, or hold on, was it Diana Ross? I think it was Diana Ross who supposedly quote unquote discovered Michael. Instead, here they're saying that a representative from, was it Sony or was it from, shoot, I forget, um, from one of the music companies, quote unquote, discovered his Michael's raw talent and introduced him to Barry Gordy, who became an early mentor for Michael as a young person. And then as he grew in popularity, he, you know, uh, partnered with Quincy Jones, who brought a lot of success as well. But it was interesting because it covered areas that I wasn't too familiar with in Michael's story. It kind of delved into the source of how he put together the Beat It production. And if I understood correctly, based on what I saw in the movies and based on what I'd seen previously and read, Michael saw a news story about uh, violence in California and the fights between the Crips and the Bloods. The Bloods being gang members who dressed in red, and the Crips being gang members who dressed in blue. Um, that's a pretty well-known thing in California. But if I'm not mistaken, they got together a bunch of the gang members to on both sides to come together and actually put together and perform the Beat It music video. And that was pretty trippy. Now, that's if I understood what was going on in the movie. Um, but that more or less goes along the same lines of what I'd previously learned. The other one was how he got involved in how Michael got pulled or convinced to do the victory tour with his brothers. And there was one of the concerts, I think it was at the Video Music Awards, VMA, um, where I wish they would have included the longer version of that area, in which he first performs with his brothers. It was like at the end of the tour. Um, Here in the movie, he makes an announcement at the end of one of the concerts. And I don't know if it was the last concert of the Victory Tour, but it sounded like it was one of the earlier concerts because Joe Jackson was making deals with Don King, the well-known uh, promoter of boxing fights and stuff. So Joe Jackson made a deal with Don King to do the Victory Tour. And so I don't know at one point in the calendar, Michael's announcement was on stage, but there was like this transitionary moment at, I think, the Video Music Awards where the Jackson 5 performed. And then at the end of their performance, it was like a medley of the Jackson 5 songs, several Jackson 5 songs, which was cool. But that part wasn't not in the movie. But after the Jackson 5 performance, there was uh, a segue or uh, oh man, not a conversion, not a it's a transition. It transitioned to Michael saying something like, the years as years being in the Jackson 5 were very special memories, something to that effect. Uh, but then that, you know, was time for something new or new things are coming. And then that's when he performed solo, doing, I think it was Billie Jean. Yeah. Yeah, on stage. It's the one performance that everyone recognizes where he takes off his black hat, spins it across the stage, and demonstrates the moonwalk for the first time. So they had the last portion in the movie, the part about him performing. They didn't have the part with the Jackson 5 performing with him, and then that transition to the solo act. I think that would have been nice to have included that. The movie itself is about 2 hours, by the way. And thankfully, there were not a whole lot of commercials in the beginning of the movie. It started at 6 p.m. There were like 3 or 4 commercials, one of which included one for, I think, Mazda. I personally don't like commercials of anything but movie trailers in movie theaters. I hate how movie theaters are so reminiscent of television because they throw up all these commercials that are irrelevant and unnecessary. But anyway, um, so they didn't have that. They had part of that concert, and then kind of touched on the origins of Thriller and his charity work, visiting children in the hospital. Uh, as part of the Victory Tour promotion, they had a deal with Pepsi, and so it covered the part involving his hair catching on fire. I didn't realize it was bad as it was. I think they said um, he had third-degree burns on his head, and he could have died if it got much worse and got on his clothes as well. But this was basically on the top of his head. Um, it covered a lot of the how he was sort of distant or put on a kind of like on his own little island into himself, where he, not physical island, but metaphorical island, where he didn't really interact with others his age. He spent a lot of time with his brothers, so he had a close relationship, mostly with his brothers and his mother, especially. I think it's Catherine Jackson, actually, with a K. Let me see. So he always seemed very close to her. They showed a lot of moments of the two of them hanging out, watching Charlie Chaplin and watching movies. Um, there were several times where they touched on Michael being into The Wizard of Oz and Peter Pan. They didn't go into any heavy drama stuff. Um, and the movie ends with that one concert that you start the movie with. I don't know why. I think they could have done without it, but they had a whole lot of crazy flashing lights on the very beginning during that concert, as he was getting ready and, prepping for it. And then when they returned to that at the end of the film, they had loads and loads of that flashing lights stuff, which irritates the crap out of me. I noticed when I was here in the theater, there was a warning sign saying that one of the other movies, was it Toy Story 5? One of the other movies had a bunch of flashing, so it might be sensitive to people with epilepsy or a sensitivity to flashing lights. They should have had a warning for that for Michael as well. But I only saw it for one movie here in this theater. And I was thinking the lack of more ads in front of the movie might be because I'm here at a showcase theater, which to my understanding is neither a Regal Cinemas nor a AMC theater. So at other theaters, you might get an easy half an hour of stupid ads and trailers. And here it was far less, which was refreshing. Anytime I start seeing things that are like TV commercials, commercials I might have seen on the web, uh, commercials about drugs and medications from Big Pharma, ads about vehicles, motor vehicles that they're trying to get you to buy. Those, like I said, irritate the crap out of me. So let me see. Several times throughout the movie, you know, I caught myself mouthing the lyrics. I didn't want to really sing aloud and it, uh, interrupt the fun of the other moviegoers. There was maybe in our showing a handful of people there for the movie. This particular 6 p.m. showing on a Saturday, early June, which was fine. I didn't mind. Um, I enjoyed the movie all in all. The very, very end of the movie, it says Michael's story continues. So I'd be interested in a sequel. Um, I like things I liked about this movie were that I knew it was a biopic. It had songs I recognize and enjoy, but it was kind of touching on like the making of or behind the scenes. You go get DVDs and Blu-rays for movies and they have extra bonus content. Seeing the background of the creation of uh, Beat It and Thriller and Michael's interest in collaboration and working with people, getting people to come together. Oh, one thing I particularly liked, speaking of which, is how they kind of delved into some of his song creation. He's like a lot of creators where you something comes to mind, you take a note of it, and then you post it on a pin board or a cork board or whatever, and then you use that to organize your thoughts. And that was how Michael ultimately, at least based on this movie, is how Michael ultimately determined what he would call his breakout album, Thriller. He was toying with the idea of uh, uh, naming it one based off of one of the other songs on the album, and the was it Sony who had his contract all his career, um, or most of his career until he had enough of them. They wanted him to just make it a self-titled album, but he felt it seemed too egotistical. So he named it after one of the songs on the playlist. In this case, Thriller. Um, I noticed that to my knowledge, there aren't any mid credits or end credits. I figure since it's a biopic, there's unlikely to be anything at the very, very end. If there was, then I messed up by not staying. I sat through some of the credits because I was curious as to who played. Again, I think her first name is Catherine. Catherine Jackson, Michael's mom, because she did pretty well. I think it's Viola Davis, but all the acting was great. Um, I also saw in maybe the mid credits roughly that Industrial Lights and Magic and Lucasfilm were involved. So I'm thinking that it was for Bubbles the Chimp. Sometimes I was trying to see if anything looked eerie or strange about Bubbles, but they did a pretty good job of him. At the same time, I was trying to figure out if how Bubbles was performing and moving would have been if they were accurate to how an actual chimpanzee would act. And based on the movie, I think they're trying to say that um, Michael got Bubbles to begin with in the first place, in part because he wanted a companion, someone to serve as a stand-in friend besides his llama. Uh, and at the same time, chimpanzees, as if I remember, are known to be sometimes temperamental based on who they're around. And Joe Jackson was such a uh, I don't know if you'd say explosive, but he was really into the power and fame, and he was very much into controlling. He was very controlling. So there's a part in the movie where he says flat out that he owned Michael, you know, and some of the movie spent time going over how Michael made efforts to distance himself and break away from his father because it was time for him to be his own man, to mature and become an adult and make his own decisions instead of being locked into the quote unquote family business. Mm. So that's quite cool. Yeah, I'd recommend watching it. Um, and like I said, I would be interested in a sequel. Um, I like that if they do release a sequel, there's a lot of drama and debate back and forth as to whether they should do a sequel. I think Hollywood is going to want to push for a sequel, regardless of the drama, because that's what they're all about, the money in the box office. Um, as to what they'd cover in the sequel, I sort of think that they might want to actually delve more into. I'm told that the director or whoever was making this film was originally planning on including all the accusations and all the drama there in the movie originally, the first one, but they ultimately decided against it. I don't know what was the ultimate deciding factor for that decision, but they opted not to include it in this one. But I kind of think they should address it. Um, people have their opinions, and I think people will be debating it till the end of time. But I think in the sequel, they should do much of the same stuff, explore the dynamics, the relationships between him and his family members, and perhaps, hopefully, be able to include um, Janet Jackson, maybe get her go ahead to be represented there, and possibly his kids, Paris and Blanket. I don't know, but you might be able to cover this in a second movie without having to make it a trilogy. I don't think you want to do a trilogy. But I think it would be important to, do more of the behind the scenes kind of stuff, explore his creative process, how he comes up with his ideas, how he puts. Oh, one of the other things I liked about this movie is the origins of how he got his music videos on MTV initially. That story I had not heard previously. So that was cool. And I think they should, in a sequel, touch on some other key moments like maybe the creation of Black or White. It's kind of a silly music video, but it was pretty funny and fun regardless. And it has Macaulay Culkin and George Wendt from Cheers. And I think that was another attempt at race relations. But, his interest in using that technology, um, you know, apparently based on this movie, he was out to, become the biggest performer out there, which arguably he probably has, all things considered. So it seemed like he accomplished his goal. But I think they should include pivotal moments. I think it was Black or White that was released, and they had a Simpsons episode. And then at the very end of The Simpsons, they had the world premiere of Black or White. And leading up to it, or prior to the start of the music video, they did Bart Simpson announced him as King of Pop. I'm wondering who came up with that idea, who declared him the King of Pop first. And, I don't particularly mind the name um, or the title. I think he contributed a lot to the music industry and made MTV what it is, along with Prince and George Michael at the time. The three of them were an amazing trio, powerhouses, and later Janet Jackson and Paula Abdul. Um, the 80s were a really special time. Um, and then I think I want to see them cover in a sequel um, the part about Michael deciding to buy the entire Beatles catalog, and he outbid Paul McCartney, one of the original Beatles, or the remaining last living Beatle, I guess. And then finally, I'd like him to cover his infighting or his disagreements with Sony, because I think in the end, I'm of the belief that those wild accusations are false. I know that seems extraordinary or hard to believe, but I think they might be false based on everything that's come out. And I think that perhaps Sony, there was a point at which, from what I understand, Michael Jackson owned like up to 50 or 50% of Sony's entire music catalog. That's a hell of a lot of money coming in to just Michael Jackson alone. And I think Sony had just about enough of that, that they tired of it And I think they concocted this whole crazy drama. But in order to make something like that stick, they would have to make it seriously um, bad. It would have to be very bad for it to destroy his reputation that much for enough people to believe that it's true. And like I said, everyone's gonna be debating this till the cows come home. But I think it was something to do with Hollywood or the music industry, possibly executives in Sony, or maybe shareholders at Sony. So if you one day see me eat it, then if it's not due to a political figure like Hillary or Obama, then it might be from someone at Sony. uh, but yeah, overall, I enjoyed Michael. Woo-hoo. Um, yeah, I liked it. I liked it. I would watch it again. I think the Queen one, the Queen biopic movie, was called Bohemian Rhapsody, wasn't it? Based on the name of one of their songs. That one I really enjoy. This one I did enjoy, but I still think Bohemian Rhapsody was overall better. I don't know, maybe it was just the story and everything they covered in it. And if I'm not mistaken, the same director or producer also did the Elvis Presley biopic. Didn't that have Tom Hanks in it? And I'm forgetting the actor who played Elvis, but I never have seen that. I would be interested in seeing it if it is available on streaming. But that concludes this out of the theater review. Let me see, what time is it? 9:50. So in 10 minutes, I'm going to watch Masters of the Universe. So I'll do an out of the theater review of Masters of the Universe, either either after midnight when the movie ends, or actually I think it's isn't it like 2 hours and 20 minutes? Or I might wait until Sunday morning. All right. Well, thanks very much for joining me. Thanks for hanging, and we will see you on the next stream. Take it easy. Happy Saturday. Bye.